So today we're going to be making a brand new tier list, ranking every meta unit in Anime Last Stand, as of the most recent Steel Ball Run update. Keep in mind the rankings in this video are just my opinion, but I still hope you find the video helpful. If you do, maybe leave a like or subscribe. But anyways, let's get into it. Okay, so for the tier list today, I'm starting off with the same rankings I always do, of meta overall, meta infinite, meta early, support, good, and farms. Went ahead and got the farms out of the way. Those are very straightforward. Bulma's better than Idol right now because of the soul rework and cost reduction being really good. Otherwise, we're going to start off with the new JoJo Steel Bar Run units here. So we have Gappy, Gyro, Valentine, Wonder of You, Johnny the new Godly, and the Battle Pass unit. We also have reworks to Wukong, Killua, Crollo, and Illumi. So starting off with Gappy, this guy's damage is actually really good, and he has a good support with the 3 different bubbles he can apply. One of them is Shred, and the Shred is very strong. Temporarily can be really good with the ability, and overall it's a very strong unit for supporting value and DPS with the new detonation rework. Gyro is going to be pretty much just a buffer. He's going to buff a lot of range and like elemental damage for people. Mostly a buffer for Johnny as well. He's going to make him function as like a nature unit. It gets rid of his weakness to nature, and also is going to make him do elemental damage, extra elemental damage, and gain more nails and stuff. There's mostly a buffer for Johnny and a pretty good one. I'd put Gyro in the support tier, but I do want to emphasize his own damage actually isn't bad. Gyro does have pretty good DPS for support especially, but for pretty much any unit he's a good buffer. Valentine, this guy is mostly just a DPS unit. He has an ability that can kind of function with supporting value with like TPing units out and performing follow-up attacks on units that create in his range, but for the most part, Valentine's just like a clone spamming, a really good DPS unit. Definitely put him in meta overall. His clones are very strong, and this is probably, in my opinion, the 3rd or 4th best unit of the update, depending on how much you value Gyro and the ability to buff Johnny. We'll talk about Johnny in a second here. Wonder of You, this is another really strong unit, in my opinion, the 2nd best of the update. This guy has 900 placement cost, so very cheap. Really good damage on placement, really good full AoE range on final upgrade. He's pretty much map-wide range. He has a bunch of different things with like full AoE damage per second, like Cosmic Dust Storm on Garo. This guy's really good, pretty much. Wonder of You, really good for full AoE Despair, really good for damage. He has clones that are also just very strong. This guy is the 2nd best unit of the update and high in meta overall. Johnny. If you haven't seen how strong this guy is, definitely watch my showcase video on him. This is the best unit in the game, hands down. I feel like this is the strongest unit they've ever dropped. Like, relative to how hard he just power crept the game, this is the strongest unit ever. The best thing about him is that he's 900 placement cost, right? And he has the summon Tusk, which is going to permanently be in Act 4 after you evolve it. And Tusk Act 4, tons of supporting value, tons of damage. He's insane for the cost that you have to invest in him. He's really cheap relative to how much he's doing, and his supporting value is also off the charts with the rewind and permanent despair from Tusk, and there's just so much he can do. He can even teleport. If you put him in the wrong spot, you can move him. I mean, Tusk is really broken. Johnny with Tusk is even more broken. Best unit hands down. You need to get this guy. Now, Ruby Rose, a Battle Pass unit. She is 1.5k placement cost, but because of the soul rework and the cost reduction, we are kind of counting 1.5k and anything like just over 1k as meta early now. I'm still kind of getting used to the soul rework and like who we want to count as meta early, but I do think Ruby Rose is definitely going to meet the requirement here, meet the bar for meta early, because she is perfect seal, really good placement damage, and she has different dot effects that she has depending on the element of enemy she's attacking. So if she's attacking something that's like water, really good for stalling, she gets Blizzard. If she's attacking light, she gets Bolt, which is really good for DPS. Replacement damage is usually going to be very high, but again, depends on the enemy she's attacking. Really good meta early unit for sure. Now, Wukong, this guy got a rework, and he's very strong. There was a bug, which I do plan to make a short video on eventually, where nuking ability at like final Nirvana bar or whatever is a very strong nuke ability menu. Actually shared a cooldown with Sunjin Wu's shadow menu, and you could just spam his nuke over and over. It's very silly. But with that bug aside, he's got patched now. Wukong is very strong. He's pretty cheap. He has a bunch of clones that he summons that are very strong, and the clones, if you max him out, you can fuse them into him, and you can get like new passives and abilities on him. I recommend you check out my video on the rework units this update if you don't know how this guy works, but overall he's very good, and I put him in meta overall, and probably right here for now. Now, Killua also got kind of a rework, a pretty huge buff. They gave him like another meter, I think it's called Rush or something, and his SPA is now like 0.5, with really high damage actually. So this guy's really good for just raw DPS, especially like single target, whole chipping down bosses and everything. Definitely going meta overall, and I would put him personally probably right about here for now. Very, very strong unit now though. The killable buff is pretty substantial. Frollo got a tiny rework, not really much going on there. It's kind of like a rework to his bookmark, the way he's going to gain bookmarks from his passive. It's much easier to get his bookmarks pretty much, and it makes him more viable in other game modes for like ability copying. But I'm still going to put him in meta infinite personally. He's arguably meta overall, depending on the content. I don't know, he's more viable for that now. I'm putting him in meta infinite, and I'll put him probably at the top of it because he can copy anyone's ability, and that makes him very, very strong. Illumi got a slight buff. They buffed his AoE size on final upgrade, because he used to only hit like 3 or 5 enemies. Now he's pretty good. I mean, he always was just kind of good tier. He's not that great for DPS, and he does have a couple weird passives that kind of nerf your units in his range. He's alright. I mean, his AoE doesn't really save the problems with him, but I mean, he's still just kind of pretty good. Okay, so now we've talked about pretty much every new unit and rework and everything in pretty good detail. I feel like I've yapped a good amount on how these units work. Now I want to speed run the rest of the units on the tier list because we've talked about them before. I do have more tier list videos you can find on this channel and showcases and everything if you want to know what these guys do. But I'm going to start speed running their rankings here because I'm sure most people just want this tier list to drop fast, so I'm going to try and drop it fast, okay? Blast is going in the good tier. He's just kind of raw damage. Gon is good for infinite. If you use his ability, he gains a lot of damage and has a nuke. Zoka's meta overall for supporting value and damage. He's got good rewinds and slow and very good single target damage. Kurapika is good for AoE damage and a little bit of support from his ability. He's actually very good. The forms of Shinra I'm not going to rank, so not the nature, water, or neutral. They're just pretty okay, towards the bottom of a good tier. Grimjow in good tier for his kind of raw damage. Blue Flame guy also in good tier for raw damage, but kind of a burn unit, buffing burn and applying fear to enemies. Merlin is a support. She's gonna have like elemental damage buff for people and nullify for AoE. Mihawk meta early for sure, very good range, very good damage on placement. Ace is a pretty good cheap burn DPS, I'll put him right about here. Yamato, definitely underrated. This unit is very, very strong if you know how to use her and her different forms. Meta overall for sure. EA is going to go in good for his black flame damage. It's not that crazy, but it is pretty alright. Merliona also going in good for burn buffing and AoE. Frieren, second best unit in the game in my opinion. Tons of supporting value, tons of nuke damage, tons of really good damage. Stark is going to go in the good tier, full AoE bolt damage, pretty alright. Erza also going in the good tier, just kind of raw damage and a pretty okay ability. Virgil, very good nuking ability for infinite runs. You can kind of repeat his nuke over and over. Nami is pretty good for her cheap early damage, but I feel like there are better options, so I'm going to throw her into the support tier. Megumin is good for nuking, so infinite runs. Yorichi, 1.5k placement cost, kind of like Ruby here. We're going to count him as meta early because you can use the soul rework now. He's a pretty good option for 1.5k for early game damage. Shanks is very good for everything. Really good damage, really good stalling value with stunning and rewinding. Very solid, pretty similar to Hisoka, meta overall. Galaxy Man, not really good. He has a super tiny bit of supporting value, but I'm going to throw him into the good tier and probably at the bottom of it. Makima, meta infinite unit for a very expensive nuke, but very strong once you get it. Garp, I'm going to throw into the good tier, very good for raw damage and nuking. Aokiji, I'm going to throw into the support tier, very good for blizzard, freeze, and time stops, stuff like that. Meliodas, meta overall, good for a little bit of supporting value and copying other units' damage. Sakura is kind of okay raw damage and a little bit of a buff. Ishtar, meta early unit for cheap hybrid damage. Master Saber is a good damage buffer. Usui is a good damage buffer in a roundabout way. He's going to perform follow-up attacks for the strongest unit in his range. Fern is a pretty good support, but also has some of the highest DPS in the game if you throw her ability on auto. Definitely meta overall. Andro is a pretty good DPS unit once you get his ability going, but it does take a while to ramp up. Dante going in the top of good, he can apply a lot of debuffs and pretty strong damage. Guts is definitely meta overall, very strong damage for AoE, especially with the soul rework. The new fire one is very strong on him. Noelle is a cheap hybrid unit with also a pretty cheap nuke for meta early. Vegeta is kind of a damage unit, he's okay. Neutral Shinra, meta infinite for his strong nuke and rewind ability. Delta, meta early for cheap hybrid full AoE damage. Asta, I'm also going to throw into meta early like Yorichi and Ruby. He's 1.5k, but pretty good damage if you farm right with the soul rework. Broly is pretty good for raw damage, but takes a long time to ramp up. Death is a good blizzard support and can buff a random unit in her range. Wang Ling meta infinite for his like kill everything ability. Madoka meta infinite for her nuke and time stop when she goes into witch mode. Nature Shinra meta infinite for his percent-based nuke damage and a chance to one-shot everything he attacks. Kefla is kind of good for raw damage. Water Shinra is good for full AoE blizzard and buffing water units. Reaper Gunslinger is just cheap hybrid damage, pretty good for meta early. Genji is a very greedy raw DPS unit who can steal other people's effects, very strong damage though, meta overall for sure. Kirito also meta overall for just raw damage really. Granola going in decent for raw damage and applying shred. Angel is meta infinite for a strong nuke that takes a really long time to ramp up. Quincy King is really good support with full AoE better fear and a damage and range buff. Anos is meta infinite for his nuke, but it takes a very long time to ramp up. Ichigo going in meta overall, very good for everything. He's very cheap and does really good damage. Tier 5 Luffy for his own damage is kind of falling off, but he does have a good nuke for infinite runs, and a really good godly lead. The support Motokurumi, meta infinite, very similar to Nature Shinra, chance to one-shot anything she attacks, and a good time stop. Buff Motokurumi, same time stop, but also a good damage buff. Usagi has a really good damage buff, but it does take a few conditions to meet. Cosmic Garo, his placement DPS is not bad, and he does have strong abilities, but mostly a support for his godly lead, which is the best buff in the game for raw damage units. Sunjin is really good for everything, and they made him easier to use this update because they made his rebirth auto abilityable. And his godly leader buff is a little bit better because of all the clone units we got this update, but overall it's really good for everything. Law is a very good support with pretty good damage, meta overall for sure. Tatsumaki is a very cheap, strong support for her slow. Gilgamesh meta overall, very good for everything. Sukuna, meta infinite for his nuking abilities. Haki, meta infinite for his ability and chance to one-shot stuff. Yuta, meta overall, very good for everything, especially his cheap nuke. Judge Guy is a support, pretty good for applying Extinguished. Subaru is a damage buffer. Maki, cheap hybrid unit with really good damage on placement, meta early. Kaido is a pretty good support for his dazed passive. Erwin is a damage buffer. Shadow, meta overall, really good for everything, and especially nuking and his permanent despair passive, very good. Diorno, meta infinite for rewinding. Itadori, meta infinite, really good for boss killing. Yu-Gi-Oh definitely meta infinite because he is hard to set up, but he does have really good damage, really good time stops, and really good nukes. Gogeta, meta infinite, has a good nuke for boss killing. Julius, meta infinite, has a good nuke that takes a while to ramp up and good for supporting value. The Dark Form of Griffith, really expensive to set up, so definitely meta infinite, but pretty good damage and good supporting value. Yuno is a cheap heal unit with really good damage and the slow passive, pretty good for meta early. The Light Mode Griffith is a really good damage buffer. Saitama, good for raw damage and nuking, meta overall. Bone Demon, cheap hybrid unit with a lot of debuffs, very good for meta early. Goku is pretty good for raw damage and nuking, but not that great anymore. Aizen, really good for support, debuffing enemies and making them take a lot more damage. Dio, really good for support, reducing other units' SPA and time stopping. Escanor is really falling off, but pretty okay raw damage and a buff to fire units. Gogeta Blue takes a while to ramp up, but very strong nuke and very strong damage, meta infinite unit. Gojo, really good support for slowing down enemies and time stopping. And finally we have Pucci. He is a cheap fillet repressure support with a rewind ability that also resets ability cooldowns. And here we have the final rankings. Of course, at the end of the day, this tier list is just my opinion, and feel free to let me know what you think in the comments down below. By the way, sorry if I sound a little bit weird in this video. I just woke up and tried to get this out as fast as I could, because a lot of people were messaging me about it. But hopefully you guys found this video helpful. Anyways, thank you to my channel members for making this video possible. You guys are the best. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Hope to see you in the next one. And have a great day.